MSNBC.com. Well, today is one of remembrance and reflection in the Gulf. A year ago, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded, killing 11 offshore workers. Oil gushed from the rig's ruptured well for 87 days, spilling 206 million gallons of crude into the Gulf. For residents and businesses, recovery from one of the worst environmental disasters in history is ongoing.
If we can get back to 30% of what we know did, we'll be, I know it's crazy to say this, somewhat satisfied, because at least we'll be able to do something and pay the bills.
Joining me now is Republican Congressman from Louisiana, Charles Boustany. Congressman, give me a sense of the ways in which your state is still suffering from this spill.
Well, Contessa, let's not forget that this was a terrible human tragedy with 11 lives lost. These were very valuable family members, workers, and it's a terrible human tragedy. In fact, Keith Manuel, his family resides in my district, in a small town in my district, and we can't ever forget that. But the human tragedy continues with those who have lost their businesses, those who have lost their livelihood, they've lost their jobs, whether they're in the seafood industry or they're oil and gas workers. It runs across the board. It's a terrible human tragedy on top of the ecological tragedy and the economic tragedy that we've seen here.
BP has paid out $1.2 billion in claims to Louisiana, and yet there is still real shortfalls for those who rely on, say, oysters out in the bay, in part because there's a perception problem there. More than 60% of the people now say they have a fear of how safe the food is, no matter what the government says about the safety of the oysters and the fish coming from the bay. The other thing is there are questions about whether the payouts are fair. What are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, first of all, let me say that Louisiana seafood is safe. There's been an unprecedented level of state and federal testing to ensure the safety of our seafood. So Gulf shrimp, our oysters, the fish in the Gulf of Mexico are very safe. And Louisiana seafood is really one of the basic foundations of our seafood for the rest of the country. So it's important that we get over that false perception that it's not. But secondly, on the Gulf Coast Restoration or Gulf Coast Compensation Fund, we have serious problems. I heard recently from a young woman whose family is in the shrimp business. They have submitted paperwork 10 times to Mr. Feinberg, and the paperwork's been lost. This is just unacceptable, and this is a story that's been repeated over and over. We've got to get this compensation fund straightened out, hold it and BP fully accountable for what needs to be done.
Congressman Boustany, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us here today on this anniversary.
Thank you. Great to be with you.